All right, we're going to discuss shot shaping with setup. So if you talk fundamentals, old school golf instruction, very much static adjustments. Now, the great thing about launch monitors, they show us how powerful those actual setup adjustments are. So we're going to take the smart tiles and look at how your pelvic, first off, rotation and side bend is going to affect your club path and face, so whether you draw the ball or fade the ball. And then we'll move into what the torso, side bend and rotation at address does to how you set up. So, for example, Brian's going to draw the ball here. So if we want Brian to draw, remember the stick, we put the stick out on the target line. So at address, I'm going to say to Brian, okay, buddy, I need you to imagine for a draw to start it right, we're going to close his hips a little bit and his torso, so that now that influences this club to go more to the right. Now your club golfer that has the big slice, they very often have a very high right hip. That's actually advantageous if you want to intentionally perhaps cut the shot or you set up open. But when we start to talk about drawing the ball, we kind of want the opposite. The great thing is we can hit a shot. So let's go ahead and set up. We'll get you in that closed position. So rotated, torso and pelvis a little closed. Got a little bit more side bend here. That's going to allow us to start the ball right of that stick and set up for a draw. And then we've got the launch monitor measuring it. Okay, so let's hit one of those. All right, so we've hit that shot. We can see that pelvis rotation at address, definitely a little bit closed. That negative number means he's turned towards the right. His trail hip is turning away, so he's closed at address. And obviously he's got a little bit of side bend here. So that's helpful. Now, what you could definitely see is his club path is 11 degrees to the right, and then his club face is, about half of that, maybe a little bit less, 4. So he's going to hit a big draw, which is what the ball did. So that's how you would use that. Now, if we wanted to sort of reduce that a little bit and say, well, I like kind of what you're doing there, but we might not need it to be as much, we might basically then create a range with his tiles here to get him a little bit less. So on the club path, we might bring the tolerance down. On the face angle, we might do the same. We might also adjust with the side bend. Now, let's say he wants to fade the ball. So Brian, we're now going to do the complete opposite. We're going to now set you up for a fade. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get him more open stance, open shoulders. So now he's tilted that plane, so he's going to swing more outside in, and he's going to start the ball left of this noodle. And now that's going to be reflected in our tiles, and then we could make those smart tiles if that's what we wanted to train. So B, let's go ahead and hit one here. All right, so Brian's hit this shot, and this is great because this is showing us a little bit more of how he's delivering the club here. So at address now, you can see that that number is 12 degrees positive. So that means he's turned towards the target side. So he's open, helps the start line. His side bend, a little bit different. Now he's got less of it, and the trail hip's high. So now that's going to allow the direction to get to the left. And obviously we see the club face and club path is kind of 180 degrees difference from where it was, but it's exactly what you need to do if you want to fade the ball. So you're using that setup as a mechanism to be able to influence the club path and then the face. So for a fade, we want the open club to face to path, and for a draw, we want the closed face to path. Just using our pivot and our setup to do that allows us. So that's the pelvis. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how the torso works. So we're just going to change the tiles. We're going to keep the same club path, face angle tiles up there, and now we're going to use the torso, and Brian's just going to address where his trunk is with side bend and rotation, and then where his trunk is for drawing and fading. So, okay, Brian, we're going to go with the draw. So we're going to exaggerate, again, the torso. I want a little bit more thoracic or torso, side bend, and we're going to make sure it's closed, so it's excessive. And then at address, now we're going to go ahead and hit a shot here. So you can see the numbers here, very much draw bias. Obviously, that was a little bit of a push. Brian didn't quite get the face close to the path, but that is reflected in the launch monitor data. The other thing that though is important, and this seems really elementary, but for making some big significant gains in people's shot shaping, the address position is massive. When we see the best players in the world down the line, we don't think they're adjusting very much, but having coached lots of them, I can tell you the setup adjustments that they make are quite significant from their feel. They may not look that big on TV, but they are significant and contribute to their ability to move the club path so they can shape the ball. So here, Brian, he's got that side bend, a lot more side bend, and he's obviously quite closer to get address with his torso. Sets up that draw very easily. You add that, marry that with the pelvis if you want to add more smart tiles. Sometimes that gets more complicated. Remember, we're trying to keep this nice and simple. Now you can monitor the pelvis and the torso and all of the variables that are affecting that start line. Now, let's play the other way with the fade, and we're going to get set up here. So at address, Brian's now going to set up with very open torso, almost leaning a little to the left. That's going to influence the orientation of the path out to the left in the downswing. And if he manages to keep the wrist angles and the face open to it, you should get a nice cut. All right, Brian, let's see one of those. All right, so now we've seen that shot. He set up with the torso rotated. He had a little less side bend, and obviously now you see that reflected in the club path number. The club path is negative, so he started the ball to the left, and then the face is around 0. Hit down a little bit on the heavy side, a little steep from that setup adjustment. Again, we're just exaggerating. We're kind of spectruming that so you can feel it. But that was an open-faced path, and the ball cut back, started left of the noodle. So that's what we're looking for when we get to address. Now, if we wanted to get in a situation where, hey, we want to train you, this is what you want to do, that's when we make something a smart tile. So Brian likes to draw the ball. So let's just go back, and we're going to make this a little bit more realistic. So we did the extremes so you could see the benefit. So now at address, let's just go ahead and get set up. So we're going to get him pretty neutral. We're going to get the torso a little bit of side bend, a little reverse K, but nothing too excessive. Obviously, if you get too excessive, it's hard. The more I'm tilted here, it's harder to get back to the ball. He's going to get that start line a bit high, too far to the right. And he's got a 6 iron here. So go ahead, set up. All right, so just where we want him. Remember, you're trying to get people, the benefit of the smart tiles is you're trying to set them to themselves. So this is where I would like Brian as the instructor. This is what I want to see. So from here, go ahead, Brian, and just swing back and through. That's the range of motion I want Brian to have at address, the setup, how I want him to be. And obviously, it's quite excessive in terms of his face to path, but that's just in the backswing. So remember, when we start talking about 3D and the club speed, everything is about rotational velocities. I want to set things up in the backswing and the setup so that he can be aggressive and he can rotate in the downswing to maximize his speed. Yes, at address, that's a little draw bias, but that's going to allow him in the downswing now to rotate and be very powerful. So if I was going to train that, I would say, okay, torso rotation at address might be a little too much, so we set it, but we could get it a little bit, we could change that range to where it would be a little bit more challenging. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So now we're overriding that. We've got our ranges. So here, obviously a little bit less to more. We're trying to stay in that corridor. The tighter we make that tolerance, the harder it is. But again, we're trying to influence that draw. You can make those parameters whatever you want them to be, depending on the shot. So now let's try and train that. So let's see how we do here on trying to get that accomplished. So let's go ahead and set up and swing. Now we can see the power of the smart tiles. So at address, Brian had the right, within the range of the torso rotation. Now what's interesting is his side bend wasn't as much, but what's actually cool is that the shot had a nice face to path in terms of the path wasn't as excessively to the right. So although he's not in the range, he's actually neutralized the ball flight, which is ideal. So the powerful thing for you guys is to be able to change these variables and figure out how much side bend and rotation somebody needs in order to get the face and path relationship that you want. There are no absolutes. Whether it's a fade or a draw, whilst it seems really elementary and simple, this setup stuff is very powerful, and the Smart Tiles allows you to train that and someone to be aware of it. Once we get into these other sort of key areas that I think you can use Smart Tiles for, we're going to go a little faster and a little more complicated, but I want you to see the process of how you use the Smart Tiles, find the range that's helping your student, then they can train from that and they can get the feel for that to allow them to improve their technique, to be able to shape their shots, whether it's a draw or whether it's a fade.